power to them, I guess. Well, it is 9 o'clock, and this meeting will be on WebEx and phone conference and live streamed on the internet. The governor of the state of Minnesota has issued Executive Order 20-01 declaring a peacetime emergency and coordinating Minnesota's strategy to protect Minnesotans from COVID-19. On March 24th, the Pine County Board of Commissioners declared a local emergency for Pine County. Based on these conditions, the chair of the Pine County Board of Commissioners have determined that the requirements of Minnesota Statute 13D-21 Subdivision 1 have been met, and it is not practical or prudent for all members of the county board to meet in person. The public is invited to join the meeting remotely by phone, and you're probably already doing that. We'll call the meeting to order and rise for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, approve the agenda. Are there any additions or corrections to the agenda?
Mr. Chair, there are no additions or corrections.
Thank you. We'll make our own. Ludwig moves.
Moral second.
More seconds. The clerk will, is there any discussion? If not, the clerk will call the roll.
District 5, Commissioner Ludwig.
I think he's saying aye, but I'm not hearing him.
Aye.
There
Wait.
Thank you. District
Aye.
1, Chair Holland.
Yes.
District 2, Commissioner Moore.
Aye.
District 3, Commissioner Shapey.
Aye.
District 4, Commissioner McRae.
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay, we are going to continue with our presentations from departments, and first up today is Terry Fawcett with probation. Terry.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Can you hear me all right? Problems hearing me?
We can hear you, Terry.
Okay, thank you. So I just kind of want to walk you down these things that I put together with the budget. You know, the main thing with probation, as we know, is the CPO reimbursement dollars continue to be down and shrink. Our revenue was up this year, as Kelly indicated last week. We projected 144,000. Revenue came in at 163. So that part of it was good. That's a continual battle. The good thing in the collection of our local corrections fees, even with the pandemic, the agents have done a great job. We projected at 43,000 this year, and they've already collected 83% of that at 35, at 58% of the year. You know, fees have really ultimately paid, so that's been good. Kelly gave the auditor's report last week talking about the difference between new levy dollars and salary benefit costs. The probation would be about $5,500. But as David indicated, that could be further reduced by $25,000 if the cultural community coach position would go to the children's collaborative. And so that meeting will be on September 9th, and we'll have a better idea then. Some good things that have happened here during COVID is probation is one of the first probation departments in the country to deliver a virtual cognitive skills program. They actually worked with the authors of the curriculum and how to do this and do it correctly. And so It's really kind of neat that a small department gets to have some national recognition for that. Pine County Probation has done a ton of training since the outset of the pandemic, and most of those have been free training opportunities. And so we're trying to look for positives and good things that have come as a result. We have now begun a transition to a paperless office, so kudos to my staff for doing that. Working with Becky to allocate less money for secure detention costs. So last year we allocated 170,000 in that secure area, and we're going to shoot for 125 this coming year, and more money in non-secure placement, 195 versus 150. This is a big rise, as well as our commitment to keep kids in our community using the evening reporting center. So I'm sure Becky will talk more about that later. Our budgetary increases are really personnel costs. The rest of the budget remains neutral. We did come on the county pay scale as of July 2019. That's increased things. Our caseload workload grant continues to pay almost $60,000 towards one position. We get that every year from the DOC. Our training budget this year has been underutilized, really basically because our state conference was canceled. We do contribute to our training line item with our lead program, COG skills, driving with care, etc. Our community alternatives line item, we have $14,000 in that. That was really significantly down due to COVID, but that's really an important line item based on trying to do more community-based outreach with kids versus any type of facility costs. Our probation continues to provide effective services. You know, the last time we did the CPO new position formula was in 2017. At that point, it indicated based on arrest, court filings, and caseloads that there was still a need for an additional FTE. To be honest with you, I can't tell you that is for certain today, only because the DOC has not given us the numbers for 2018 and 2019, and several counties have requested that information. There are some other areas, you know, depending on where we come in at consideration to cut, but they all have, you know, consequences. We talked about the community alternatives, safety supplies or supplies in general. It's a $3,000 line item. Reference books is $800, but some depending on where we are in our curriculum, sometimes we don't use that. Juvenile transportation that we put in last year, it's only $1,000, but it's an important resource for kids. Our other professional and tech services line item, you know, we paid for speakers out of that. Now we just paid a big bill in advertising for one of our grant positions, and then our UA supplies come out of that. We've already reduced that from $6,750 to $5,500, and now put it in for $5,000 this coming year. And I guess lastly, this didn't cost more money. We just allocated the money someplace else. But association dues is something that we voted on as CPO directors to, depending on how many agents you have, to charge dues for each county. For example, if you're under 10, I think it was $250. Up to 10 was, or 10 to 15 was 500, and then beyond that was 750. And the big reason for that was ensuring that, especially with the cancellation of our conference, but to make sure that we're funding our lobbyist, who's you know, been very, very important this last year. So with that, I would open it up for questions if you had any.
Thanks, Terry. I know from the AMC Blue Ribbon Committee, we're kind of done with our work for a while now, but we met last week, and you know, the question comes continually from Jack Swanson up in Roseau County is, as our jail population have decreased and we put more pressure on probation, when will we see some seamlessness, I guess, you know, so we could reduce jail staff and maybe our total staff numbers would stay the same, but maybe not. And we put more resources towards probation, no matter what delivery system of probation we have. I don't know, that's kind of an open-ended question probably, but
Well, it's probably what caused this last year when I was the president, has caused the most, frustration for me personally, and I know for a lot of people in community supervision. It's, you know, everybody should talk about police reform right now. I get that. But what happened along the way after May and the George Floyd incident, it shifted focus 100% to police reform, and people in the state of Minnesota through the legislative session quit talking about funding corrections. And no matter how many times we continue to try to put that in front of them, and I know there's a conversation I think going on right now regarding the two prisons. That's been the biggest frustration. You can't have one without the other. You know, if you're gonna reduce, or if you're gonna have early release programs from jails and prisons, where are they gonna go? You know, Minnesota continues to be one of the lowest populations in state prisons in the country. And that's been by design, because people in the state of Minnesota believe in people should have second chances and they're going to be back in our communities. Most people that go to prison don't go there very long, or, you know, in our sentencing guidelines. And so, you know, and my office in particular, we pay for it in the pretrial, you know, in the pretrial numbers. And those are including pending felons. So I don't know what that answer is, but it's not going to change. Nothing's going to change. I'll leave it with this, Commissioner. There is an effort now being done through our association, and this is something I brought up to Commissioner Snell twice, and now it's, I think, getting some momentum. Is there was discussion about bringing in the council and state governments to facilitate conversation about doing things differently. And that was my final message to Commissioner Schnell leaving my term as president, was until we really get at the table and you have a conversation, irrespective of delivery systems and so forth, and really talk about a better way of funding and supporting community corrections in the state, nothing will ever change. You know, and as somebody who's testified to the legislature, you know, another frustration is you go in front of the legislature and they give you 5 minutes or less to tell everything about the history of the 3 delivery systems and why you need funding. And if you're not done in 5 minutes, they kick you out of the room, you know? And so it seems to me that that's not the best way to go about business. And those are the messages I think we have to continue to deliver to the legislature, to say, we're still a long ways off of making things better.
I appreciate that, Terry, and I appreciate you educating us so that we can carry that same message. It's just as frustrating for us to, in little tiny Pine County, seem to kind of have it figured out and then go to the legislature and get, you know, that very short window of opportunity to say something. And it seems like half the time it falls on deaf ears. But we keep trying. But I would hope we could, I don't know if we can get some pilot projects around that say this is working. I mean, I think we have proof that what we're doing is working. But we need to change our mindset about where we're spending our money, I think.
I agree.
Thank you very much. Does
Thank
anybody
you.
got any other questions, comments for Terry?
Mr. Chair,
Yeah.
Ludwig, I have one question. I know you were, or I don't know if it's for Terry, but is there any reason, or is the state giving a reason why they're not going up to the 50% funding on the probation officers?
Well, Commissioner, I'll answer that. No, when I testified the last time, Actually, Marion O'Neill asked the commissioner that question directly. Please tell us why counties aren't getting 50% funding and why that hasn't happened since 1996. He didn't have an answer. He said he would deliver that answer back. And he has not delivered that answer back to the legislature. And I may have mentioned this before, when we got done testifying, he leaned over and said to me, I was hoping you'd bail me out on this one. And I said, sorry, it's, cause that's a question we've had for years is, it's been interesting since in my 5 years in Pine County. I've only seen the finance people from the DOC one time, and that was at my very first CPO directors meeting. They came up and gave some type of explanation on how they do things financially when they get the budget. But to really answer your question, that what makes things so difficult is the commissioner has 100% authority on how that money is distributed. And so I don't think he wanted to answer the question, because at the end of the day, and why we want to have this bigger discussion with Council of State Governments is, there are some that say that maybe the Department of Corrections should get out of field supervision, which they do very little of anyway, and then just focus on the prisons. Because at the end of the day, when you talk about funding, and it happened again this time, which is why on the chopping block, it's the prisons dominate the funding discussion at the expense of the community supervision.
Thank you.
Thanks, Terry.
You're welcome.
Any other comments for Terry? If not, we'll move along to county attorney. Talk about law library, county attorney, and victim services, I presume.
Exactly. Good morning, Mr. Chair and commissioners. Wonder if I could try to share a slide I have. It's okay with Ryan. Oops. All right. Does everybody see that? Okay. So I guess I'll start with the easy one. That's the law library. I don't have a slide for that, but that one, of course, there's going to be a $0 ask. That usually just nets out from the library fees that we get through the court system. Usually when we resolve cases, there are fines and fees. There's usually a $10 fee tacked on for the law library, and that's how the law library gets income, and then that income maintains the library. So if you're ever looking for an easy committee assignment, you might have to fight Josh over that one. It's a well-earned per diem for that one, but yeah, it's always interesting. We always talk about, we really can't spend money on that one. We find projects and stuff, but that one always seems to net out, and we usually have a surplus. So that's one of those easy ones that we get to deal with. The next one that I'll talk about is the Victim Services Coordinator. And this is one that's mostly funded by a $70,000 grant. And just an idea of what our Victim Services Coordinator does is that just this past year, 2019, or actually this is the fiscal year, she provided services to over 1,000 people, sent over 1,500 notifications to victims and witnesses, 956 contacts about the criminal justice system. These are people that call her up and ask her things about HROs or current cases and help with that. It's rather daunting for somebody who doesn't know a lot about the criminal justice system to understand and get information about that. So it's been a very helpful service. 600 contacts on victims' rights, obtaining notification, and then she provides other services as well, the on-scene crisis response, referrals, resources programs. She's been absolutely tremendous asset to our office, asset to the community, asset to our cases, and very well worth the money on that one. There is a small county ask on that one. I'll talk about that later. But recently received an email from somebody who's worked with victim services coordinators around the state, and this person said that low end's the best one that she's ever worked with. So some high compliment there for our county and then some of the work that she's doing. So next, we'll go to my office, the county attorney's office, and just give you an idea of where we've been sitting for the past years. We've, for the most part, plateaued off on the adult. These are only adult criminal cases. There's a number of other things we do too, but I always found that this was a good metric. These are the misdemeanor and above cases, gross misdemeanor felonies. And we're fairly in line with how we've been charging since about 2016, around 1,400 cases, adult cases a year, and we get over 2,000 referrals. Obviously, we don't charge every case that we get referred to our office. Some of them need to go back for further investigation. Some of them are just not crimes. You know, you get a lot of, you know, referrals, like my neighbor gave his middle finger to me and a person should be charged. Well, we can't really charge a crime on something like that. So we get a lot of things like that too. But that's how we're sitting with our charges. How does that compare to the region? We're fairly close to Carleton County, still ahead of them. They're probably the closest county to us. But if you look at the list, counties with larger populations like Chisago, Isani, charge a lot less cases than we do. So in our region, we came in #1 again this year. I think we've been #1 since about 2015, 2014. But we also have some of the least amount of attorneys and more cases per attorneys, if we're to go that way. And that doesn't count, of course, the traffic cases. More numbers. We have a high juvenile caseload. We're down a bit this year for 2019. I think that's due a lot to Terry's work and the restorative justice and the diversions that we do on a number of those cases, so they really don't go through court. Not noted, of course, are child support, civil cases, all the advice and things that we do for other departments, CHIPS, guardians, termination of parental rights, civil commitments. We've had a lot of civil commitments. Those have increased substantially. And the strengths with the offices, typical SWOT analysis here. We have strong collaboration with other offices, departments. I think you've heard this over and over again, but we have a wonderful county. Every department, every office in this county, we get along with great. I enjoy working with the other leaders of that we have. I think we have the optimal team that we have now, so I'm very happy with that. This has been a wonderful place to work, and especially in my capacity, I've absolutely loved it, and it's because of the people. Weaknesses: we haven't kept pace with growth. Again, we are low on our attorneys and I guess legal assistants too. And of course, opportunities. We still work all those other programs, collaboration with other departments, especially probation with our PATS department, with the FCI Sandstone, the ERC, working with Health and Human Services, the Sheriff's Office. That's been phenomenal. I think that this county stands really above the other counties in Minnesota in the type of collaboration and the work that we've done. Threats, obviously a high caseload. The court system continues to decentralize. When I started as a prosecutor 15 years ago, you'd go to the court and hand them all the materials and they'd start a case, open things up. And over the years, as there's been more technology, it falls more and more on county offices to actually do these cases, to start the cases in the courtroom and such. So it continues to decentralize and we end up doing more of the work. And of course, there's always a competitive labor market. Less people are going to law school nowadays. More people in the new generation want to work in urban environments and not so much the small towns. So it gets more difficult to recruit people, and that's why I always feel that salaries and retaining the good people that we have are important. And knock on wood, my attorney staff has been fairly stable for the last few years now. So what's the bottom line? Well, the bottom line is that For my office's budget, it's a 7.4 increase is the request. The entire increase is really based on salaries and wages. It's because of market increase and the county contribution. I'm not asking for any increases on any of their line items. We're still falling under those line items at the end of the year. And this past year, we've managed pretty well because we're not really going to conferences. A lot of conferences are online, and a lot of the fees have been free on those conferences and things like that. So we're probably going to have, we'll be under, especially in our conference budget and things like that. So I think we're going to be pretty well this year. That's why I'm fairly confident we can have a 0% increase on those other line items. So we're only asking for salaries, wages. Law library, $0 ask. Again, that's a net. And victim services, we're seeking $7,541.50, which is 9% more than what we had last year. And that's solely due to, again, salaries, wages, but the grant covers the rest of the funding on that position, which is $70,000. And this is a grant that's been around, I believe, since the 1970s. I don't think that's ever going to go away. So there'll always be that cushion there on that. So I think that's all I had, but that's if there's any questions, be happy to take them.
Thanks, Reese. Where does that grant, does that come from the state, or is that?
So, Mr. Commissioner, yeah, Mr. Chair. So it's both the state and federal. So it's a nice mix of the two.
Okay.
So one's from the DOJ, and then the other percentage is from the OJP.
Questions for Reese? Anybody? You wowed us, Reese.
I like that. Thanks.
All right. Boy, that clock bangs a lot, doesn't it? Okay, we're going to move on then to Health and Human Services. Becky.
And Reese, I think you're still sharing your screen if you want to end screen sharing.
Okay.
I like the picture though. Where is that?
How do I do that?
If you hover on your screen up at the top, you should get a little pop-up that says end sharing or something like that.
You're not sitting on the deck of a cabin and they just have your camera pointed out there, do you?
No, I wish. There we go. Thank you.
All right. Thanks.
All right. Mr. Chair, would you prefer to hear Veteran Services first or HHS?
I have Veteran Services on my top of my agenda, so we can take them in order. And Barb looks like her smiley face is all ready to go.
She's ready to go.
All right. Take it away, Barb.
Good morning, members of the board. Ryan, I also have my slide to share, so I'm just requesting the ability to share that.
You should be able to do that, Barb.
All right, I am. All right, let me see here. So is everyone able to view this slide? The Veteran Service budget, did it come up yet? Yes. Awesome.
Yep.
It's up.
All right, so everyone's picture disappeared except for Ryan, so I will zoom them out. Welcome, everyone. I am here to present the Veteran Service budget. And I just created a slide similar to what Kelly had shown you with hers on her presentation day. It just outlines the, and I'll just go through them and we'll go through them quickly. And it just shows you the increase in each line item. And we're asking for an 8.87 increase, mainly due, well, actually pretty exclusively due to salaries. So if you will start at the beginning here, and I can highlight, we receive a $10,000 Community Veterans Service Office grant each year. That's what you had approved at the last August board meeting. So thank you very much. We are looking at a 0% increase in that, 0% increase in van donations. We receive veterans van donations from community organizations to offset the van trips that we, you'll see that later on in the expenses. Hopefully those compensate. As you can see, we haven't received any yet in 2020, mainly because a lot of those community organizations, we attend those meetings. The Veteran Service Office will attend, and a lot of those have been postponed online, different types of things. So our salary increase is a 10%, and that's due to there are 2 permanent employees in that line item that would, and so there's a 2.9% increase and a step increase for Mindy and Ben. We'll highlight this line item later. As you can see, we're significantly under budget in our part-time, but there is a 2.9% increase, and we'll hopefully we can offset what we're asking for from 2020 funds. So our county contribution is up, and the reason that is up is because we didn't figure in 2020. There's an added contribution for Karen's contribution, which we Veteran Services only is allocated a third of her salary, and she does a great job, and we're so thankful and welcome to have her as she greets veterans. But we don't allocate all of her salary to veteran service budget, just a third, because that's, Becky will talk about how that's distributed or through the rest of HHS budget. So there's increase, when there's an increase in salary, there's an increase in para and telephone. So we're asking for an increase there, or para and FICA. We're not asking for an increase in telephone. Our postage and freight is up this year. And one of the reasons is the veterans, the grants, all of those have to be sent by mail. So unlike most of the other items that we send, they're requiring that it is actually posted sent. So we do use the postage quite a bit. There's a 0% increase in conferences and registration and repair and maintenance of computer, travel, mileage, auto insurance. There is I just want to highlight this. I put a negative 30% to kind of offset some of the other, we decreased the amount that we allocate to the CVSO grant. And the reason is the first year that I've been involved with, actually, Mindy and I walked through the CVSO grant, and this is exactly as it looks with what we submitted to the Veterans Department, the Minnesota Veterans Services Department. We allocated 3,000 of the salaries, and this is what we've done in the past. I just am now involved on a level so that I can see that. So it looks like a decrease. So don't be alarmed. We're still going to get the same great service. We're just matching our grant budget line item to our county budget so that it will look exactly the same. And you'll receive a savings. We'll allocate some of that grant to our to salaries. The last is office supplies went up. The reason is we were doing coffee talks in 2020. We hope to be starting those again. And so we're going to be providing donuts and coffee and all kinds of exciting stuff to the veterans that attended those. In January, we were seeing 28 veterans come to the coffee talk. And we were seeing some success before COVID-19. The last thing I want to highlight as we go down to same amount of revenue, same an expense of 8.09% increase is this number down here. 12,923 is the increase for 2021. But I have a solution if you're willing. So if you can go back up to the line item, which talks about, or right here, this line item, Ben has been on leave for a significant amount of time. And he will continue to be on leave for significant, for the foreseeable future. I'm unsure when he's coming back. I would anticipate a $12,000 savings in that line item that could be carried over from 2020 if permissible, if you would want to do that. Because right now in that line item, we are only at 27%. So there will be a significant, I'm anticipating upwards of a $12,000 savings because he's currently on an unpaid leave at the moment. So, really it could wash out, the two could wash out because we are significantly under budget, which I'm always glad. I mean, I'm sure you're always glad to hear we're under budget, but we're doing fine. Mindy is forging ahead without him. It's been what it is. She's been working hard during this time. There's been an increase in grants and such, but Karen's of much assistance. So that is all I have. I would like to stop sharing so I can see everyone, if that's all right. I can push the stop button here. And hopefully I go back to everyone. So does anyone have any questions for me and the veteran service budget?
I have one, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, go ahead.
Ludwig, so how is the van activity as far as carrying the activity to and from the hospital? Did that see a change in the last few months?
Yes, when COVID first started, or when it first became an issue, we saw relatively few van rides. But now that we are returning to do weekly trips, because now I think the veterans, it's transportation to Superior and Minneapolis and St. Cloud. They've picked up again because the limitations on people seeing their physicians has really loosened up. So now you're able to get back into to see your physician. So there was a lull for a couple months, but I think we're back up there again where we're providing quite a few van rides.
And we still have volunteer drivers there? Is that?
Yes, we haven't. It's working.
Is there enough of them?
Is there enough of them? Well, there's never enough, but because we're always actively recruiting for people to drive the van. But I think we've had a few solid drivers that have hung with us over the last couple months. So I haven't seen a need to cancel any rides.
Barb, I would like to just make a comment, and that is because I have during this last year gone through the process of being approved for veterans benefits, and it's quite a process, but Mindy has hung in there and we've got through that. The thing I've been very impressed with is the veterans services that are available if you're willing to do them via phone conference with these, instead of going and having this half-hour consultation, you're able to do them over the phone or on video, and that they've worked very well for me. And I don't know if that's the case for every veteran, but that has saved a lot of travel time. And once I got into the system, the people that I have had contact with have been just wonderful people. The getting the approval process to the finish line was a long process, but we got there. So
yeah, I'm glad you had a good experience. It is a very detailed process, and Mindy has been doing a lot of phone. When we first, I was thinking, when first COVID first arrived, she was doing a lot of phone conferences, and then I know that she was meeting people, like they were pulling their cars up in the parking lot so that they could sign, because they had to physically sign some claims or grants. So I know she was doing a lot over the phone, and then kind of meeting people just here in the parking lots all over to try to get their signature. So she was really going up and above to try to meet people where they were at, if they wanted her to come out and, sign at their doorstep. She'd leave it for them and they could return it by mail. So she's done a really great job going up and above to meet our veterans when things are changing all the time.
She met me in the McDonald's parking lot, and she just didn't do it for me. She was there for somebody else and said, I'm going to be there at 3:15 or whatever. And I pulled in and signed on the hood of her Jeep. And because it's everything else you can kind of do electronically, it seems like, except the veteran service paperwork. So
yeah.
Anyway.
We just started a new program, and it was lucky for us because of COVID-19. They offered a no startup fee, which that was very significant. And hopefully we can transition to a few of them being electronic with this new program that's approved by the Minnesota Veterans Office. But Mindy will go up and above to meet people wherever they need to. And I've seen her do a great job.
Thanks, Barb.
You're welcome. Any other questions?
I think we got it. Thank you.
All right.
Becky, you're up.
Thank you. I am just going to take a minute and grab my PowerPoint presentation. Try to share that. Hopefully everybody can see it.
I think we all have it also in front of us to follow with Becky, so.
Okay. Are you able, I'm curious, are you able to see it right now?
Yes.
Okay. So let's see. Good morning, everybody. So in your presentation, and hopefully everybody can see, this is the 2021 HHS budget presentation. A lot of work goes into this. So I'd really like to start by thanking the HHS management team for all their work and everything that they do to make this budget a reality. It usually takes about 4 months to put together. So definitely appreciate all their time and attention to it and getting it to its final form. Okay, so in the 2021 budget, I think you've heard from a lot of department heads already that there were some certain challenges in all of our budgets. So the first one is personnel costs. Prior to doing some vacancy management and some reduction in other expenses, HHS was out of the gate about $465,000 in the hole. And so much of that, a ton of that was due actually to personnel costs. And so in later slides, I'll chat about how we reduce some of that gap between revenue and expenses. Another challenge is really how we bill out rent and other department-wide expenses. Basically, in a nutshell, it has the way we bill it out now, the way we've been encouraged to bill it out per the auditors is really creating a loss in some of the amount of the reimbursement to HHS. So we've had to try to find other areas to make up some of that gap. And then I would also share it's interesting and challenging to budget for public health and other areas in HHS with so much unknown as we're moving into a pandemic. And I'm pretty sure we'll still be in a pandemic next year. So it was, we did our best job budgeting for that with a lot of unknown. So back earlier in August, as of August 11th, there was about a $265,000 difference between revenues and expenses in the HHS budget. So I just kind of pressed pause there and brought that first iteration of the budget to the HHS committee, and it's Commissioners Helen and Chafee who sit on that committee, and just requested some feedback on how they would like to see that gap narrowed. And so several options were presented. We could use fund balance from 2020. We could continue to trim placement expenses, could cut $20,000 in placement for a set aside for future years of the evening reporting center, could cut personnel, or be less conservative in some areas of revenue projection. And obviously the other choice was do some kind of combination of all of the above. And that last one, a combination of the above, that was the desired choice of the HHS committee. So these next few slides are going to kind of take you through each of those recommendations and show you how they were weaved into the 2021 budget. So first, we're going to hopefully use some fund balance from 2020. And so currently, as we sit right now, the department's revenue should exceed expenses when 2020 wraps up. And so how did we get there? So we got there in a couple different ways. First, there were some furloughs when COVID hit. I think all of those furloughs were in our social services division. Secondly, we're utilizing some vacancy management, which just is kind of a fancy way of saying we're keeping positions open for longer than normal to capture some savings that way. We also suspended some of our contracted services with some of our vendors and providers of services. So specifically, we cut some contracted expenses to TSA, to Phase, and then to Monarch Counseling for parent mentor services. Thankfully, it's been a really good year for placements as far as financially. We are projected to be under budget for our placement expenses. And with that, I think it's really important just to give a shout out to Beth and Barb and Terry and all their teams for really doing a good job trying to keep kids in the community and safely in their home whenever possible. It's really a team effort. And then finally, thankfully, Commissioner Helen sat on the Blue Ribbon Commission. So we have these waivers for our services. So we don't necessarily have to see some of our clients face-to-face like normal. So thankfully, we're able to keep our staff safe and our community and clients safe. However, we're still able to bill out for those services as if we're seeing them face-to-face. And so all of that has been really, really helpful in pivoting to 2021. So I continued to trim placement and other expenses. And so I just want to talk about that a little bit. In the first iteration of the budget, there was $20,000 of tax levy set aside for future years evening reporting center. That's a program that Terry runs. It's a community-based program where we really try hard to keep kids in their own community versus sending them away to placement. Right now, there's a grant that really finances that programming and the staff that goes towards that programming. I think that grant is up in about 1.5 to 2 years. And so I think that's something that Terry and the commissioners, everybody should have on their radar, just how is that going to get funded and how can we start saving for that now? Unfortunately, this is just not the year to do that because of all the shortfalls and increased expenses. I did lower projected expenses in all 3 placement areas, both for child protection, children's mental health, and probation. Much of that savings and expense cutting is in child protection and children's mental health. We've really seen a decrease in those placement expenses this year, even pre-COVID. So I'm sure COVID has had an impact on our placement expenses, but even before COVID happened, we were starting to see a decrease in placements in those two arenas. So there's just a lot of great work going on even before COVID hit. And then I had mentioned in a previous slide, contracted services. So in the 2021 budget, I've eliminated some contracted services for the parent mentor program. So that's a savings of about $37,000. And we've decreased contracted services in other areas to phase into TSA. This slide just gives you a snapshot of the budget for 2021 for placements. And it kind of looks at the accrued costs over the last couple years. So you can see 2018 and 2019 were a little tough financially. We are looking to be under budget when 2020 ends in the placement area, and budgeted for 2021. It seems to be wise to continue to project downwards. You'll see a huge chunk of that decrease comes in child protection. I just cannot say enough that they are doing some really great work, some relationship building, and really some great safety planning. Children's mental health placements also went down significantly in the 2021 budget. It was also an option to be less conservative in some projected revenues. So I took a look at some of the line items where I thought they could be bumped up a little bit. So I did add some revenue to the adult mental health targeted case management area. And I did that based on previous year's revenue. It seemed like that could be bumped up a little bit. And I also added some revenue to the child welfare targeted case management line item due to an increase in the reimbursement rates that we received for doing that work. So that also seemed to be a wise way to increase revenue in those two areas. You'll also see that 2021 reduces personnel in the HHS budget. So I want to explain that a little bit. So we are continuing to use vacancy management in the 2021 budget to reduce personnel expenses. So right now we have a child protection social worker vacancy, and we have that in the 2021 budget open through the end of September. So 3/4 of the year, we have that not being filled. Right now, staffing indicates that that is okay to do, but with COVID, I think we're walking into some unknown territory. So I don't know exactly what's going to happen. I do know right now that the caseloads in child protection are very manageable, and that has allowed us to reduce placement expenses and also allows us to keep that vacancy open for a while. We also have a full-time case aide in social services, and right now she's down to a 0.6 FTE as she's using the phased retirement option. In the 2021 budget, that is not backfilled until October 1st. So those are the two vacancies that we've left open for a considerable amount of time in the 2021 budget to kind of help us make ends meet. And then we've also reduced in the 2021 budget, the FTE by a 0.5 FTE in the income maintenance division. And that may not seem like a lot, but every bit helps. And if you're that person who's going from full-time to half-time, it's a big deal. So this is being done to really help us get to a zero increase in the tax levy. So finally, just to revisit the committee recommendations on how to get that revenue and expenses closer together, we utilized all these options to get us to a 0% increase in tax levy for 2021. So now I'm going to go into the numbers a little bit. The next 3 slides are going to cover each of the 3 major divisions in Health and Human Services. So those 3 areas are income maintenance, social services, and public health. Income maintenance consists of child support, fraud, and financial assistance. Social services consists of adult protection, child protection, children's and adult mental health, aging and disability services, licensing, and chemical health. And public health consists of family health, community health, WIC, and things like emergency preparedness, which certainly you don't use that every year, but we have certainly tapped into that a lot in this global pandemic. So here, this first slide for income maintenance, you can kind of see how it breaks down between 2020 and 2021. You will see that there's both an increase in revenue and in expenses for the income maintenance division. Unfortunately, the expenses grew by more than the revenue. So the shortfall is about 40,000 in this division. I do just want to add some clarity to that. So most of the increases in expenses in this area are due to personnel increases, the COLA, the STEP, and the insurance increase. Thankfully, income maintenance in 2020 was in the computer rotation, so we are not purchasing computers for this group this year since they have new computers in 2020. So little things like that have helped, and also this is the division where in 2021 there would be an individual going from full-time to half-time. In social services, you can see the difference between 2020 and 2021. Both revenue and expenses decreased. However, there's still a projected shortfall of about $66,000 in this division. Again, just to explain how we got here, there's some decrease in placement expenses, so that is really helpful. Commitment expenses increased in the 2021 budget. I know Reese hit on that earlier, that we've seen an increase in commitments. We absolutely have seen that increase, and sometimes that impacts our bottom line in a few line items. And then increase in personnel expenses in the social services division. So this is our area where we have the most FTEs. And so when there's an increase in personnel costs, it shows in this area. Public health, here's the difference between 2020 and 2021. You can see that both revenue and expenses decrease. I do just want to add that we have a big grant coming to an end in the middle of 2021. So that's the planning and implementation grant. That's a swing of about $100,000. So that's one of the major drivers in how there was revenue and expenses that decreased in this area. The net difference in 2021 between revenue and expenses is $40,000 to the bad. And so I'll talk a little bit in how we plan on negating that impact. So this slide really looks at bringing it together for the county board. So in income maintenance, expenses exceeded revenues by $38,655. In social services, expenses exceeded revenues by about $66,000. And in public health, expenses exceeded revenues by $40,000. And this is after all the cuts to services and the cuts to personnel and other expenses. So what we decided to do was use those savings from 2020 to balance the income maintenance and social services budgets. It seems that social services took a major hit during COVID and expenses, and with some of the services and the furloughs, the vacancy management. So it seems wise to be able to use those savings into 2021. So a lot of tough decisions were made in 2020 to hopefully get us to a better place in 2021, not knowing how the pandemic was going to shake out or how the economy is really going to shake out by the end of all this. And then in public health, there's about that $40,000 deficit. So we are utilizing the McBee third-party restricted funds to balance public health. So at the end of the day, the final outcome for the 2021 HHS budget is that we have an unbalanced budget. There are cuts in expenses and personnel, but we're using reserves and restricted funds along with those cuts that we're implementing so that there's no increase in the tax levy to the HHS department. I would say that with any HHS budget going into any year, you always have wild cards. So I think that's just amplified moving forward. There's placements, there's commitments that we've talked about. If somebody is committed to Anoka Metro Regional Hospital, and then they no longer require that level of care, from that moment on, if that individual is at Anoka and continues to be at Anoka and we can't find a different placement for that individual, that costs us about $1,500 a day. So if that's 30 days that an individual's there past their level of care, that's a $45,000 hit to the budget, and that's all tax levy. So we just don't ever know how commitments are going to pan out in any given year. We're also in the middle, maybe even in the beginning of a pandemic, so what's going to happen. And that absolutely impacts the economy. And I think we're in a difficult place to know what's exactly going to happen. I would like to explain that when economic times are difficult, there is an increased caseload and increased reliance on some of our financial assistance programs. So I am concerned about caseload for our financial workers, just because I think it's very safe to predict that their caseloads would be going up next year if we continue to see an economic downturn. On the radar, I know Terry mentioned this a little bit. So if we want to do some reforming in our systems, we really have to look at bolstering some type of services to individuals. And that doesn't mean it has to be through Health and Human Services. It could mean more mental health services in the jail and provided to law enforcement, partnering with law enforcement on ride-alongs to individuals who are struggling with mental health concerns. So that is on our radar, and I think that's very difficult for HHS to afford right now. And it's difficult for law enforcement to afford right now also. Also, we're recovering from the pandemic, not only as it pertains to like the community health, but also any larger financial impact it has on the county and the state and in the nation. And then looking forward to sustainable changes, I think we have to keep the pressure on to see or to really help in any way that we can for Mille Lacs Band to become and gain that initiative tribe status. And that is all I have. So at this point, I'm going to try to stop sharing and just see if there's any questions.
Thank you, Becky. You know, the HHS committee, Steve and I met with Becky, a couple, 3 weeks ago, I can't remember, but anyway, as she pointed out in her slides, we gave some recommendation from that committee what we'd like to have her work on, and you were spot on, Becky. You did a marvelous job of listening and converting that to something that we can live with. I do want to caution the board, anytime you use you know, reserve revenues of any kind, at some point the budget, you're kicking that can down the road, so to speak. We have, Becky's worked very hard at keeping on top of that stuff, so we were I think we're beyond lucky. It was planned to keep those funds in check, and so we had those reserve funds to use. You know, that McVie funding is in the public health arena is going to run out at some point. We've known that from day one, but this is the time to use it. And so I don't know. Steve, do you have anything to add from the committee's standpoint?
Well, not really, except, you know, I mean, we kind of directed Becky to use her best judgment on what she felt would work, and I think, Becky, you did an excellent job. really, I'm impressed. So, and I agree with Steve. Sometimes it's not prudent to use reserves, and sometimes it is. And I think this case, it probably is a time that we should do that. So I guess that's about all I'd have to say.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, go ahead, Matt.
Ludwig, yeah. So Becky, how often is the level of care rising up and becoming or being a problem for us? As far as, because I know they're not just going to let that person walk away, so they still need care. So that's why I always struggle with that.
That's a great question. And first of all, I just want to apologize if there's a lot of background noise. There's some construction going on in down Main Street. And so it's very loud to me, but hopefully nobody else hears it. It's becoming, I would say, almost more of an issue. And I think COVID has impacted that some. So it's really hard to vet out COVID versus other times. But even before COVID, we had an individual at Anoka for about a month's time because they can't go from that level of care just to being on their own, living at home successfully. And then Anoka has to approve the placement, and sometimes they're a little skittish to do that. And so we're really caught between a rock and a hard place with those cases. It's unfortunate that it's all tax levy because that is just a huge chunk of change. I think hopefully we can work with the state on that in the future to try to get some kind of split share on that. But I see it becoming more of an issue, not less, and that's why it was increased in the 2021 budget.
Thank you. Does anybody else have any advice for Becky? I appreciate all the work you put into that, Becky. It was a wonderful report. Thank you.
Thank you, and a huge thanks to the management team too at HHS. They're always very helpful.
And the construction noise is we'll blame it on Mark because he's trying to get that street done before he promised me he'd have it done before school started. So they can't miss a beat this week. And saying that, if we got no more questions for Becky, we're going to move on to highway. Mark?
All right. Just as a quick overview with the nuts and bolts here, the building maintenance, we're looking for a levy increase of about 2%, so not too bad, $11,727. And Public Works Road and Bridge Fund, we're looking at a levy increase of 2.6%, so that's $50,000. We've still got $1.2 million in sales tax funds scheduled for next year. I don't see any impact on that. We've included the 2.9% COLA health insurance increase as guided by the administrator's office, and we currently have 30 full-time positions budgeted for Public Works, and we had 5 for building maintenance. We're down to 4 in building maintenance. We have a retirement coming up. We'll be down to 3, and we're gonna just fill that void right now with a cleaning service and see how that goes. It's potential that we could save a little money next year if that works, and could be down to 3 full-time personnel for next year, just as a trial run. And then we have a retirement we haven't filled, so we're at 29 in Public Works, and I expect another retirement here this fall, so we would be at 28. And so we would temporarily not fill those 2 retirements, and we'd be budgeting for 28 full-time positions in Public Works. And those 2 positions are in the engineering technician group, so it doesn't affect snow plowing and things like that. Same, otherwise the big thing, most things were, the big items we're kind of trying to hold the line on. We can continue to buy, five Mark squads and then probably 6 fleet vehicles and start replacing some tandems again. So we're holding the line on that, and then no increase in the building fund. Would be looking at 75,000 and probably be putting that into the roof on the 1610 building. And then anything else we have left over would go into the parking. And I guess there's more to talk about on that, but just at this point, that's what we're looking at as an overview. One big issue for us next year is we're projecting a 15% reduction in gas tax revenues and the other monies that go into our state aid revenues. It looks like vehicle purchases have increased significantly. So, we don't really know if it's going to be a 15% reduction, if it's going to be more or less. But we break that out into the different areas that we get the funds. It's about 650,000 in our regular construction account. We will have $1 million in there at the end of the year to carry over into 2021. So that will help with the blow. But we did have to push back a project next year that you guys approved at the last meeting. Our municipal maintenance is $90,000, and that basically is money that we help use to operate and do certain maintenance activities, mostly, the more expensive ones in the summer. And our regular maintenance is $435,000. So we're over $500,000 of reduction in our operating money. And we'll kind of go through that. We're looking at a combination, of holding back those positions and some reductions across the board in some of our maintenance activities that we do in the summer, because we can control that. We can't control the winter as much. So that's kind of what we're looking at. And then municipal construction's down about 137,000. And that shouldn't impact anything for next year. So overall, it's a $1.3 million reduction in our state revenues. And so we've kind of just broken that out and how we can chip away at that number. It's a big number, it's overall, it's a 10% reduction to our department. And so I assume you don't want me to ask for $1.3 million in levy money, but if you'd like to do that, we'll take it.
Assumption, Mark.
As we go through
here for nothing.
So any questions on the big overview? Okay. As I go through, administration, we're not really changing anything. That's a 3.8% increase overall, and that's essentially, we got some training expected. We had a retirement, and Todd Lindstrom was our bridge inspector, so we're looking at getting some training for our assistant engineer to try to pick up that. We're hiring a consultant to do that this fall. It's about $20,000. So it's not a huge number, but we'd like to work our assistant engineer, Aaron, into doing that role maybe in a year or two. So we got to start getting him the training for that. In engineering, we're seeing about a 20% reduction in permanent salaries. That therefore will reduce our overtime significantly, and our county contribution for health insurance. So that's a big number. That kind of carries across the board. We'll have a little increase in professional services. I got a 10% increase in that, 110,000. Most of that, it can go up or down, and it's just money in and money out with the state that we can collect. So if that number goes higher, it's, our revenue, our corresponding revenue goes higher. So it's not a big deal. And everything else is relatively flat, but our actual construction number is going up 35%. We'll have 6,130,000 in construction next year. So a little bit more on contract construction. Our maintenance, we've got the salary increases in that, so it's about a 5% increase. Professional services, we've got a $40,000 reduction. That's our chloriding mostly. So we will have to do less chloriding next year. 15,000 in traffic striping. We did quite a bit more this year, so that'll help offset doing a little bit less next year. 100,000 in rental agreements, so that's our ditching, graveling, those types of activities, center line culverts. So a lot of those activities were busy all summer. We're going to be doing less of those with a contractor. We'll have to do a little bit more work with what we can do with our own staff. 32,000 in aggregates. We'll buy less gravel next year. We're going to have some on hand to carry over from this year. And so those are the big things. And overall, our maintenance area is down 8.1%. So if those numbers from the state get better, then those numbers will just get put back in there. So, you know, that money will just get back to where we normally be if we get a surprise. Fleet services, everything's pretty level. Looks like, you know, we reduced the diesel a little bit because the price is still pretty stable. And you got your increase for staff for wages and insurance, and that's overall it's a 0.5% increase in fleet services. Our revenues we are budgeting $9,000 for permit fees. So that's not something we had in our budget before. So we'll see how that comes in. So we're getting a little bit of revenue there. 2.6% in the property tax. Everything else is, you know, pretty well in line. 13.9% and 13.7% reduction in maintenance and municipal and regular maintenance. It's not 15 because we actually got a little bit more this year than what was budgeted. So it's not a 15% reduction because it's according to the budget. We're actually getting a little bit more this year. So I'm basing it off what we actually got this year. And like I said, our regular construction is about 4.7 million. And we're projecting to get about 3.7 million. So there's $1 million that we've carried over from this year that'll go into next year. So that should balance that out. And overall, it's a 12% increase in our revenues and a 12% in our expenditures for total budget of about 11.5 million. So that's our public works. And that's pretty well in line a typical year. We're in the 10, 11, $12 million range year over year. So building maintenance, we're kind of up in the air on what our rental revenue is. At this point, we're just kind of plugging in what we have currently. We're maybe anticipating most of next year isn't going to change. And I think David had maybe had a goal by the fall or towards the end of next year, we could maybe make that transition out of the South Pine Government Center and the city could take it over. Like I say, we're budgeting for 4 staff. If we don't fill that 4th position and we continue with the cleaning contract, the cleaning is going to be about $4,000 a month. So it's pretty hard to, when you factor in the insurance and the wages, you know, we're going to spend more than that on an employee. So the benefit is we have an employee that can do some other things. The good thing about the cleaning service that Pete pointed out is when somebody's on vacation, the cleaning service continues no matter what. So right now, if somebody's on vacation or sick or out on leave, you know, Pete and the other guys have to make up for it somehow, whether that's overtime or not doing other things. So the cleaning service, you know, wouldn't be interrupted based on the employee's use of PTO and such. So that would be one positive, but we'll look at it and see how it goes. we had some issues last time, but we're hoping that we can work those out this time around. Everything else, we pretty much have flat. Our utilities are down this year. So I'm anticipating there'll be more use of the building next year and things will kind of get back to normal. So I'm not going to make any cuts on that at this point. So overall, about $591,725 to maintain your buildings and pay for utilities and all that. So not a big number in your overall budget, but an important part of things. So, and we ended up with a 2% levy increase on that. So that's what I got. Not a lot of change. $50,000 is a lot of help for us because that's 50,000 less we got to cut this year, and it helps us next year or 2022. You know, our baseline's a little bit higher, so that helps us out down the road too. So if you got extra money and you want to give us more, we certainly would, you know, increase those maintenance activities. That's where that money would go if there's any other money to hand out. But right now we can get by with 50,000, we think, and we'll work around whatever we get here. So any questions?
Thanks for the can-do attitude, Mark. I mean, I appreciate all of you folks for stepping up.
Well, you just try to stay positive with it and work with what you got. We can do about it. So
yeah,
some people might notice some difference, but overall, you know, when we show up and we replace culverts and driveway approaches, 90% of the people, they don't know one way or the other or care one way or the other. You know, once in a while we'll get a complaint that we can, but for the most part, we're just being proactive and replacing things that need to be replaced. So
it's like we could save a lot of money by not buying squad cars and tandem dump trucks for a year, but then the next year you got to spend twice as much to catch up.
Yeah, no, we got a stable number in there. And like we said, you know, if that thing can go up in the future, that'd be great. But at least it's something that we can keep using over time, and it's not a bond that's gonna run out and we're gonna have to scramble again. So and the sales tax money really has been a lifesaver for us to kind of keep some of those other roads and some of these bridge projects going. And so I'm hoping that's something we can count on as we go into the future, because that seems to be a really good decision you guys made, and the public seems to not be upset about it. So
any questions for Mark? Wow, we're cruising. General budget discussion. Well, so far I like the direction we've gone and or where we're at. I know we've got a couple departments coming in next week who have most of our increase seems to be in the public safety, so we'll hear from them next week, and maybe they'll have something figured out by then that doesn't have a $500,000 increase attached to it. David, do you have any direction for us?
Nothing specific. I think Becky laid out a strategy that is probably appropriate or going to be true for the county, in that in balancing the 2021 budget, there are some savings from 2020 that we're going to look to carry forward. And then there also potentially could be some 2020 CARES Act funding that will assist with saving 2020 county money that we can carry forward. And then the rest of it will be looking at services that may need to be reduce through programs or staffing. And then any gap that's left is gonna require a levy increase. So we've got till the end of September to kind of work all of those details and get the equation to balance.
Yeah, we got some big balls in the air yet that, you know, could affect, you know, 1 or 2% levy increases type issues, you know. I appreciate the work everybody has done so far that we've heard from. How about the rest of the board? Anything you want to throw out there? Tomorrow morning, we're going to meet for the first time since, I believe, March in person in Sandstone, and we're gonna one of the reasons we wanted to do that is to have our all be in the same room as we hear from our. I always say the wrong word, David. Is it the bond counsel, or is that what we call it?
Our financial advisor.
Financial advisor. I always call it bond counsel, but I guess I got the wrong terminology. Financial advisor. Kelly, do you have anything that we should be thinking about overnight with that?
And nothing more necessarily than what you heard last week. Just really think about considering that new project money and adding in some things. Because again, you're not going to see interest rates this low, and we can do some interesting things with the bond refunding that will hopefully take some pressure off of the levy over the next year, 2 years, 3 years.
Our minds wide open and hopefully get them filled up. That when you just live in the house and you're in and out all day, you don't realize how many times that grandfather clock and cuckoo clock go off, but my goodness. Anyway, anybody have anything else for today? I want to thank all of our presenters. You did an awesome job. I love it. It gives us a lot of great things to think about instead of just throwing a number at the wall and say, figure it out. So you people have done a lot of work, and it does not go unnoticed. So thank you. If nobody's got anything else, I guess we could adjourn the meeting. I'll declare it adjourned. Thank you.